Your opening credits explain where the transcript came from, but I'm wondering if you could talk about how you came to decide to make this manuscript into a film.
Yeah. I've been interested in Peter Hujar's work maybe the last 25 years, a long time. As soon as I discovered it, I felt a connection to what he was interested in photographing and also how he did that. And over the years, I guess that grew, and I don't have any Hujar prints, but I got a lot of books of Hujar photos, and I've been engaged in his story. I also made a film called Last Address in 2010, which is a film about a group of New York City artists who died of AIDS, and really got to know actually just their last address, where they lived. So I felt a connection for Peter. He lived 2nd Avenue and 12th Street above the Village East Cinema. So if you're ever at the Village East, the corner apartment with those big windows is Peter's apartment. In 2021, I was in Paris shooting a film called Passages with Ben Whishaw, and thank you. And at the gay bookstore in the neighborhood, I saw this book, and as soon as I saw it, I bought it and thought it would be interesting. I read it over a couple of weekends. It's pretty short, but it took me a little while. And really, when I got to the last paragraph of the book, which described Peter's description of being up late at night on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 12th Street, listening to the sex workers on the street beneath him, I was really taken with that image and the feeling it evoked in me. So pretty instantly, I thought, oh, I should make a movie of this text, and I should do it with Ben, who I was working with. So I found Linda Rosenkrantz on Instagram, and I DM'd her and talked to her. It took about a year, I guess, for us to get the rights worked out. Soon into that period, I realized that Linda, who was very agile on every social media site, was actually 88 years old at the time. She's become very much a dear person in my life. I'm very grateful to her. And so it was really this idea to make an art piece in connection to this text and with Ben collaboratively. I didn't know what the length would be. I didn't know what the film would be. But I felt like the connection, he and I both, it turned out Ben does have a self-portrait of Peter Hujar. It's called Peter Hujar Depressed in his house. And we both have a connection to queer creativity and history and also experimentation. You know, that's interesting to both of us as artists, so we dove in.
And how quickly did you come upon how you were going to adapt a single recording, finite, into a piece of cinema?
Not quickly, and also not, I somehow managed to raise the financing for the film quickly, gratefully. It was a very small project, but it was still money. And I got Rebecca Hall to agree to do the film with us. And we were donated location by Westbeth Artist Housing, which is an artist housing that started in 1971 in the West Village. So we had this incredible space that is the apartment in the film. And I went to try to figure out how to shoot the film, and I thought, I'm going to take some stand-ins and I'm going to block this in real time. I'm going to, it's just people are talking for an hour and a half, so I'm just going to have people talking for an hour and a half, and that's going to be the movie. And within about 20 minutes, I was like, this is a disaster. Everything about this is not going to work, because it was very, how was I going to motivate any movement? And I think of myself, honestly, as an action filmmaker, someone who's interested in movement and cinema and a kind of velocity, even at a certain pace. And so I had about 5 weeks of actual, factual sleepless nights, because I had people coming to make something, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. And in the process, I had luckily, because we had this space in Westbeth, I had these two stand-ins, very lovely film students who were with me. And with Alex Ash, who's the cinematographer, we spent a lot of time in that space, and we started photographing these two people at different times of the day in the space. And over time, those images, along with a series of images from films started that I was interested in, because I thought of the film as a kind of reverie in cinema as well. They started to line up on my notes app, and at a certain point I looked at them and I thought, oh, that is a film. And sort of seeing those, and then simultaneously, it's not a short story how this happened, seeing those and simultaneously seeing a few films that were made, experimental, personal cinema, usually single person with a subject in front of them. Films like Andy Warhol's Poor Little Rich Girl, which he made with Edie Sedgwick, Portrait of Jason, Shirley Clark's film, and particularly a film by Jim McBride called My Girlfriend's Wedding, which basically people were just talking to the person with the camera, and the cuts were made by time. That was why people went from one space to another space, is because there was an ellipse of time. And I thought, oh, I can do that with these images. And that really freed the whole thing up, and it became possible. So this one location, which Linda says she thinks she sat across a kitchen table with Peter and they talked, and that was it, became her apartment, the fictional version of her apartment became 33 locations, 33 scenes that we made in the space. And the film became, for me, an exploration of these very particular ideas of space, light, form, and time.
I'm wondering, the performances are so lovely. I'm wondering how you approached the idea of portraying these real people, one somewhat known and one less known.
Well, I knew from the beginning, someone quoted, I actually heard this quote only recently, but Robert Altman, a friend who works with Altman, did work with Altman, quoted him as saying, whatever film we're making, it's not a documentary. And I took that idea from the beginning to know that I wasn't really going back in time. I was making a contemporary film. And I felt very free to do it however I wanted. There was no, I felt free also in my relationship with Linda, but I was curious about Linda, and I was curious about Peter. Specifically, there's no video image that I've ever seen or heard of Peter. So there's no video at all. I never see him moving. There is a lot of photographs, and there's also 2 audio tapes that I found. There's a lot of voice messages that he left, but there's 2 audio tapes. One is Peter hypnotizing himself to learn how to stop smoking cigarettes. And the other is a long interview that David Wojnarowicz, Peter's friend, mentee, lover, partner in some ways, made of Peter towards the end of his life. That's about a 2-hour interview that's in the Fales Downtown Collection at NYU. And that was the thing that I think helped Ben the most. But Ben does not sound like Peter Hujar, and he had no need to or intention to. So it gave him something, but I would not say it's a replica of Peter's voice, which is very specific.
Yeah, I was wondering about the voice, but also I was thinking more about the pacing, because
well, there's no audio tape because the audio disappeared, which in a way was great. I mean, even if there was audio, we felt very free. I would say that Ben found his own pace. I don't rehearse in my work with actors in advance, and I made the decision to do the same with this, which was really almost a fatal error. Because it was a huge amount of, it was 55 pages of text for Ben to learn, and he came to the set having only said it to himself. The first day that we started shooting, it was actually, I noticed that he couldn't quite get it to the point of being fluid, because it was the kind of thing that you would have, if it was a stage play, you would rehearse, and you'd have a run through and a dress rehearsal, and you would say it and say it and say it. And so I thought, oh, this is too bad, because day 2 is tomorrow, and he can't do it. And then I had the idea that every day I would say, Ben, we're going to shoot this particular section, and I gave him about an hour and a half in the morning to run the lines. And then on day 2, he was like, he was on, whatever, on the road. He was on his way. So the question of fluidity disappeared, and it became utterly fluid to him. And fluid, I mean like the ideas, the concepts, the rhythm, the jazz, the nature of improvisation, which is not improvisational, but the language is improvisational because it's so realistic. And he was really doing every comma and every pause, and he was doing it quite exactly. And Rebecca had the opportunity to talk often with Linda, and I think did her own version. I mean, I think the thing that Rebecca does best in conveying who Linda Rosenkrantz is and was is that she understood the nature of both the curiosity, the self-effacement, and the love. Like Rebecca is telling a story in this film for me as an actor. She's really describing and telling a story about a love affair between two friends.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you have no rehearsal about sort of the way Rebecca Hall and Ben worked together to build that believability of that friendship. Because did they know, or have they worked together before?
No.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's what I thought.
they hadn't known each other before. They're both British actors. Rebecca lives in the States and Ben lives in London. I did what I usually do, which is I set them up for one date. I have found that actors are wise enough to figure out they need to create intimacy falsely. And they do so because that's the nature of the job. So they went to Hector's in the West Village, which is now gone. Sadly, a great diner near the Gansford. And they had lunch, and I think that was part of it, but also the situation of shooting the film. I think the environment is very trusting. What's interesting to me about the shooting of this film is that the text, where things are happening, is not based on the text. So I don't say oh, they're talking about Betty Davis, so they should be on the bed. It's just at that point, that's when they're going to be on the bed. And so it's a little like a John Cage experiment to some extent. It's whatever dialogue I put in that time is going to be affected by where they are, as is ours. So here we are, right? And I think that became very interesting to watch because they spoke in different ways if it was daytime or they were outside in comparison to a dining table with a candle. They spoke differently, and they found different parts of the relationship.
And my last question before I open it up to the audience is if you could just talk a little bit. As I said, it's a time I have some nostalgia for, even though I was a child-ish at that time. But I'm just wondering if you can talk about how you approached the period nature of the film in terms of anything, production, design, speech, anything.
Well, I think I was made an effort to resist any nostalgia. At least I did have that active sense that it wasn't something that I wanted to participate in much. That being said, there are things that are in these conversations which I think about, but less in terms of what was, but more in terms of what might we find or what might we look for now. And things are different. I mean, he has 4 friends or 5 friends drop over. He has 7 phone calls. He lives in a neighborhood. One of the things I was thinking about before the screening is the films that come to New York Film Festival. I think the thing they have in common is they're local films. They're local to their place. And so, I've always thought they're also a lot of personal cinema, but they're actually films about a particular place. And that seems to me thrilling to be able to make a film like that now. And I think that's, to some extent, what makes the film different than but it's also, in that sense, I think in '74 there was so much experimentation in cinema, and I think about I think about Ackerman, or I think about Brakhage, or I think about, there just was this idea that film was an art form, and I feel like that I'm still fighting for myself as best I can. I don't know. I think I was interested in sharing with my collaborators as many details as I could. So, for example, there's like, I think 47 people mentioned in the course of the film, and I don't know much about them, but I know there's only one, Bob Money, who plays the harpsichord and also does indexing, that I don't really know anything about. Every other one, I had enough information that I could share just something. And I would say, not what's incredible about Ben's performance is he somehow took that little bit of information, which is like less than Wikipedia, and he turned it into a world that's very real and vivid. And every character seems to be alive somewhere. And that's pretty interesting to me.
Okay, we're going to take some of your questions. There are people in the audience with microphones, so please wait for them to come to you before you ask. But do raise your hand if you have a question. Yeah, we'll start right down here towards the front.
Thank you. Great film. Beautiful. Two-part question. First part's a little more serious. What was the process like in choosing what parts of the interview to use? Was it an easy process? Were there multiple versions of the different narratives you wanted to tell? And then how many cigarettes do you think you used on set during the filming of it?
The first question, early in the process of writing a screenplay for the script, I did not write the text, but I did write a screenplay. I went back to the Morgan Library where the original transcript is held, and I went through it line by line, and I realized that the published version of the transcript had been an edited version, which I hadn't been aware of. And so I discovered a lot of things that weren't in the original. And some things I feel like there's something beautiful about the things that I saved, because they would have been part of what most things are, which is forgotten. But the whole section about Betty Javis and Joan Crawford is not in the book. And I feel like, somehow now it exists, and it was really lost, gone. But that being said, then I edited a movie. I mean, it's the complete transcript that I shot, minus two little things. One, something I didn't think Linda would have wanted in it, and yeah, little things. But then when I edited it, if something wasn't interesting or didn't go well or was boring, then I took it out. I could do whatever I wanted. So I didn't write any words, but I took some out and I added some. Cigarettes, I guess he's a real smoker. And that was true, but he actually didn't drink. So the whole drinking of scotch and Ben was like on set, I was like, can you drink? I need you to do something here. What about having a scotch? And he's like, well, Peter didn't drink. And I said, it's okay. So cigarettes, I don't know. I don't have a number. Someone will have to count, I guess.
Anybody else? Yeah, we'll go to the middle of the middle.
Hello. Did you ever consider, if it were even possible, to interpolate any of Hujar's photographs into the film?
No, I didn't. I was pretty clear for myself that the film was about a conversation, and that it wasn't about a replication of anything other than the language that existed in the text and between the two performers. So no, I never did.
All right, we'll take one more right there at the edge.
You explicitly, or the movie explicitly acknowledged itself as a narrative feature a couple times. The beginning and the end, you show the act of filming a movie. There's a great shot where Rebecca looks straight into the camera. I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about that in relation to the themes of the film.
Yeah, I think for me the film was always an experiment in form, and so I was interested in making a film that was also about images and image making. And I think as a filmmaker, I wanted to be free and have some sort of reverie and some sort of, I think of like a bath in images, and particularly cinematic images that were meaningful to me. I felt that I wanted to make a film about pleasure, and I didn't want to make a film about truth, per se. And so in some ways, the clapper at the beginning is really the clapper when it says the film starts and we're shooting a film is to say it's not 1974, and I know that. So, and we're constructing something. And by the way, Ben and Rebecca are both British. So for me, that was already moving away from a kind of realism that I'd been more engaged in. They were constructing characters. And ultimately, I felt that there were these kind of, I called them studio shots, these sort of moments that are not even part of the text and not part of the moment between them, which are, in a way, further just making the whole thing an object of images. And what I found is that those moments, it seems to me for the audience, it says like, oh, wake up. Like, you don't know what you're watching yet. And it both takes you out and then maybe brings you back in a different way. And I'd say specifically the film is a film about portraiture. And so I was interested in bringing in my own portraiture into the film.
If you could do us a favor and stay in your seats for half a minute, we would appreciate it. And Ira, thank you so much. So happy to have you here and to be able to show this beautiful film.
Thank you.